So as many of you guys know, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is up for re-election this year, and we're just a few weeks away from the Democratic primary to decide who will be the Democratic challenger to flip the bluegrass state back blue. So I want to take a look at some interesting polling here because I think it's really fascinating and really interesting, some of the stuff that we're seeing out of this, which is that this poll actually takes a look in general at a generic Democratic opponent. The other poll that we have was actually sort of sanctioned by Amy McGrath, who was the establishment Democratic pick, although we're going to get into that in just a second. But anyway, let's take a look at some of these numbers here. So the newest Kentucky poll that finds that Mitch McConnell continues to be unpopular in the state, with only 41% of voters approving of the job that he's doing compared to 48% who disapprove. And only 69% of Republicans approve of his job. Independents are split against him 30 to 53, which is unbelievable. I mean, that is a terrible split. And of course, Democrats are even more against him than are the independents. Now, this here's the kicker. Pay attention here. Mitch McConnell only has a 47 to 44 point lead against a generic Democrat on the ballot. By contrast, Donald Trump has a 16-point lead over Joe Biden in the state, 55 to 39. And it's possible that these numbers have shifted a little bit. Again, this was a few weeks ago, May 20th. Donald Trump's numbers, as we've talked about in some other recent videos, Donald Trump's numbers have been sliding since then. So it's curious and very interesting here. But the super important thing to note here is how there are Trump supporters out there, people who are supporting Donald Trump who are like, I don't know about that Mitch McConnell guy. I don't know if I support Mitch McConnell. So that's fascinating, and that's really, really interesting. It tells us that this seat, that Kentucky is a winnable place. That Kentucky, the place of Mitch McConnell, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, is in play. This seat is in play, and that's fascinating, and that's really, really exciting to see. Now, we're going to obviously have to follow and see how this race plays forward and goes forward, but of course, the main thing that we're going to have to see when it comes to how it goes forward is who the Democrats put up in election. Now, there's two main challengers right now. We're starting to look at the polls coming out. There's two main challengers here. We've got Amy McGrath, who's the Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi Democratic establishment pick, and then there's the progressive running in the race, Charles Booker. Charles Booker was recently endorsed by AOC and Bernie Sanders. In fact, let me show you that here. So this is just a little bumper sticker here talking about how AOC is endorsing Charles Booker. Basically, Charles Booker is running for Senate and building a kind of principled, inclusive, winning coalition in Kentucky that can inspire positive change, and I am proud to endorse him. That's really exciting. And Bernie Sanders, also Bernie backs insurgent in Kentucky, referring to Charles Booker here. I don't know if you can see that referring to Charles Booker, and if you go in here, so Bernie Sanders is backing Charles Booker. And also, though, and this is, I think, where it starts to get really, really interesting. It's not just, at this point, the sort of insurgent kind of progressive wing, Bernie, AOC, and the other progressives who's endorsing Charles Booker. We're starting to see establishment figures in Kentucky, not outside of Kentucky, but in Kentucky, say, you know what, actually, Booker, that guy is really good. That guy really speaks to Kentuckians, and I know that if I back Booker, that's the cynical choice for me, and that's going to be something that even if Booker loses this time around, I know if I go with Booker, Booker's on his way up, is basically the sort of analysis here. But this is about a highest circulation Kentucky newspaper endorses Charles Booker in the Kentucky race. This is referring to the Louisville Carrier Journal, which is the largest sort of newspaper, as you can see there, in Kentucky, who is endorsing. And also, Charles Booker currently has the most endorsements from those who are in the state Senate and in the state House. Like, in other words, the local elected officials of Kentucky are like, I am going with Charles Booker. I'm not going with Amy McGrath. Now, if you don't know who Amy McGrath is, I just want to play you this one clip of Amy McGrath versus Charles Booker because I think it's super telling. It tells you basically everything you need to know. Here's the clip.
Have you been on the ground in Louisville with the protesters the last 3 days, or in Lexington or elsewhere, Ms. McGrath?
I have not.
And why?
Well, I've been with my family, and I've had some family things going on this past weekend. But I've been following the news and watching and making sure that I think we're in the middle of a pandemic, so we also have to look at is that the place to be right now? So that's really why.
I stand before you as your brother, as your cousin, as your neighbor, as your fellow good troublemaker. My name is Charles Booker.
So you can see there Amy McGrath basically saying, no, I'm not really doing anything when it comes to these protests. Look, I mean, coronavirus, listen to that. That's a really big deal. And then you see there Charles Booker really taking a stand, working with the people, building coalitions. He's out there fighting on the front lines when it comes to these issues and when it comes to this stuff in general. But let's look at policies. Let's look at policies, because you might be hearing all this and think, okay, well, he's out there in the crowds, but what are his policies? What are the things that he's standing for? You can see here, it's clear, it's definitive, and it's not like wiggling around the words, right? Like sometimes you see politicians who are like, yeah, I'm for universal health care, single payer, but not single payer, and you hear all these slippery words like affordable or access to. But no, this is super, super clear. And if you listen to Charles Booker, if you listen to the stuff that he's speaking, the stuff that he says, if you watch his speeches, he's also just like this. I'm in support of Medicare for all. I want a Green New Deal. I want a universal basic income. In some sense, he's to the left of Bernie Sanders. At least when it came to Bernie Sanders' presidential run, I should clarify when saying that. But I mean, this is really exciting. I mean, this is a genuinely exciting platform. Now, I live in Virginia, so I can't vote for him, but I'm getting excited about this. Getting money out of politics, one of my top issues personally, getting money out of politics. I mean, this is, really exciting, and I'll be sure, obviously, to leave this down in the description if you want to check this out. I'll also leave down in the description Amy McGrath, if you're interested in what she has to say. But let's take a look at some of these. I mean, you guys know my politics and opinions. Let's look at her position on healthcare. I believe healthcare should be affordable and accessible to all Americans. Yeah, so this is a classic example of establishment slippery words, because what is affordable and accessible healthcare like? What does that mean, right? Like be realistic with yourself. That doesn't mean anything. She's not telling you what policies she's going to support. She's just telling you, I'm in favor of good things and I oppose bad things. Everyone, there is not a person in this world out there who is opposed to affordable healthcare, right? If you're watching this, you would agree, oh yeah, affordable healthcare, that's a good thing. Nobody's right? This is just the classic talking points of I'm in favor of good things and I oppose bad things. She wants to secure our economic future. When it comes to, I mean, I guess you could argue that there's a slight claim here when it comes to climate change, because she's she listens to our scientists. Climate change and resource scarcity are with us today. Scientists around the world know it. So, okay, she's claiming that she listens. She's a pro-Second Amendment. And, I mean, this really goes to a broader point when it comes to politics, which is that Amy McGrath's broader strategy, and if you look at her rhetoric, you look at her policies out there, she's essentially trying to win by running to the right of Mitch McConnell. She's going around bragging about how she supports term limits and Mitch McConnell opposes them, which Donald Trump agrees with term limits. So she's trying to tag herself on when it comes to Donald Trump. She's trying to attach and say, I'm more pro-Trump than you are, Mitch McConnell. And her main argument, or at least one of her main arguments for why voters of Kentucky should pick her, is because Mitch McConnell is obstructing the agenda of Donald Trump. That's the claim that she's trying to run on. That's how she's trying to run. That's how she thinks that she can excite the Democratic base to turn out for her. Because, look, maybe she might be able to trick a few Republicans and shave off a few votes there, but how are you going to excite the Democrats? How are you going to excite the Democratic base? And I mentioned earlier in this video how a number of state representatives, state senators, state representatives, in fact, more than who have backed Amy McGrath, are backing Charles Booker. Why? Because they know that Amy McGrath is toxic. If they latch on to Amy McGrath, then they're going to get hurt. Then they're going to get beat because their base won't turn out for them. What does that mean? What does that mean ultimately? It means that the people who are closer to the ground think that Charles Booker is the guy, that Charles Booker is better to beat Mitch McConnell, that Charles Booker is the one who actually has a real shot at this thing. And I want to remind you guys of her 2018 run. So she ran for Congress, not for Senate. When she was running for Congress, she was super anti-Kavanaugh and she was pro-Christine Blasey Ford. When she decided to announce her run for Senate, she flipped on that. She's still saying, oh, well, I do think that, Blasey Ford was credible, but I'm pro-Kavanaugh now. I'm pro-Kavanaugh now. She just flip-flops, man. She just changes her mind, because before, again, she was running like anti-Trump. She was running like the whole, Trump's a bad guy. I don't like his mean tweets. He's really, really bad. And that's why we need to, flip this seat here blue, because that was at the time advantageous. Now that she's running statewide for Kentucky, she thinks to herself, the strategy for me is just to latch on to Donald Trump because Donald Trump's popular. Donald Trump's popular, so let me say that I'm more pro-Trump than Mitch McConnell, and Mitch McConnell is obstructing Donald Trump, and that's why you've got to get me in to win. Man, that's the stuff that I really don't like when it comes to politics. I've talked about it on this channel so many times. I would rather just have someone be honest and just say what they really believe and disagree with me than someone who's sitting around pretending like they agree with me and then they try to trick me. I'm not here for that, man. I'm not here for that at all, one little tiny bit. In fact, I honestly think, this is something known in political science as triangulation. It's the idea that by trying to move to the center, you can sort of surpass or transcend politics, and so it kind of creates like a little triangle. Oh, Illuminati right there. No, but anyway, you can try to transcend the dynamics of left and right. By sort of moving to the right, you can hope to insulate yourself from attacks from the opponent, because by doing that, by moving to the right, basically, you make it so that then if they try to criticize you, they're inadvertently attacking themselves, and so they can't criticize them. But the problem with that, of course, is while it might be good tactics in some instances for a particular race, it's always bad strategy, because in the long run, finally, voters decide and make up their own minds based on the resources, based on the arguments that they see presented to them in the public space, which is to say reason is a public affair. In other words, yeah, you're trying to poll test and figure out where the voters are, but the voters are also listening to you. The voters are picking among the options presented to them by the politicians. So if you move to the right, if you move to the center in order to try to win votes, try to win elections, in the long run, what you end up doing is just moving the whole country to the right. Right? That's why Republicans are so successful by presenting maximalist demands, like talking about a flat tax. A flat tax, that's like an incredibly sort of just like right-wing proposal. Now, look, there are people out there who support that, right? There really are people out there who support that. But it's an incredibly just sort of right-wing proposal, but Republicans just sort of float that idea around there, and it moves the whole discourse to the right. The left needs to be out here doing the exact same thing, and to try to move into triangulation, you just end up reducing the sort of ideas that are out there in the public space. I want to remind you of the quote. In fact, this is the quote that sunk Amy McGrath's campaign for Congress last time around. She was out there at a sort of private, exclusive big donor fundraiser, and there was a leaked audio tape in which she said, quote, I'm reading the quote now, "I am further left. I am more progressive than anyone in the state of Kentucky." That's what Amy McGrath said while at a private big donor fundraiser, an exclusive big donor fundraiser. There she is claiming that she's really far to the left. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means that she's clearly a chameleon, right? Because to the big donors, to the people who she needs money for, because she knows that they're more to the left, she's telling them, actually, trust me, I'm more to the left. And then to the voters of Kentucky, what was she saying? Well, at the time, she was saying she's anti-Trump, but she's still pretty conservative, right? So either she's lying to the donors or she's lying to the people of Kentucky. But I'll tell you what, regardless, you're not a progressive, Amy McGrath. If you don't have a backbone to be honest and you're out there sucking up to big donors, guess what? You're not a progressive. That means you're not a progressive. Now, look, I'm not saying that like she's an entirely like dishonest person. Like some people might hear me saying that and think that I'm like attacking her character. No, I'm just saying like that's not like that's just not right. Like you can't be a progressive if you're out there sucking up to big donors and you're lying you're lying to the big donors or you're lying to the people of Kentucky. But regardless, you can't be a progressive if you're out there begging up to big donors and lying to one of the two people out there. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. And again, I don't think that in the long run, that's really good strategy when it comes to politics. So I'm going to leave off with an ad for Charles Booker. If you want to support him, again, I'll have his information down in the description there for you to check out. So I'm going to leave off with an ad for Charles Booker. See you all in the next one.
You know the name of the man I'm talking about, but he doesn't know your name. He doesn't see you in the hospital bed or the checkout line or at the safety drills in your classroom. He doesn't see you at all. How many times are we going to re-elect politicians who don't laugh at our jokes, who don't sing at our churches, or who wouldn't call to show us support when we get laid off or get in a car wreck? He doesn't need hope or faith. He's got money and power. And the more power he's won in Washington, the more we've lost in Kentucky. His millionaire friends mine our land, our labor, without paying a living wage. He denies climate change, and he denies us a future. And this man knows more than anybody how to work the system in Washington. He's the architect, but he's done nothing for Kentucky because he's not your neighbor. He's not your brother. He ain't even from here. So I grew up in the west end of Louisville. I live in 40203, the poorest zip code in the state. Growing up, I remember So often my mom would go without eating dinner just to save food for me. But I still went to school hungry and tired sometimes. I lived that. And I knew it didn't have to be that way. So I had faith that things could get better. I had faith because I saw my grandparents opening up their homes to foster care. I saw my neighbors fighting back on the picket line, and I saw my uncle become an advocate after my cousin was murdered. Teachers, students, union leaders, we're all believers. And my mom always told me that if you have faith just the size of a mustard seed, you can speak to a mountain, and that mountain has to move. I'm not the alternative to Mitch McConnell. We are. This isn't the type of deal where someone can just run for office or someone can just ask for your vote. Nah, I'm asking for that kind of perseverance you only find in Kentucky. I'm asking us to build that kind of community you only find in Kentucky. Kentucky needs a movement, and we need to start talking about our dreams again. We need a Green New Deal to create thousands of good jobs right here in the Commonwealth to help us do what we do best, take care of one another. We can guarantee new jobs for teachers and nurses, build new hospitals and schools, and we can win Medicare for all so that nobody has to die because they don't have money in their pocket. We can win real democracy in Washington and the workplace. And when we win, we show that something new is happening in Kentucky. Because we're not a joke. We're not a tragedy. I know Kentucky is the future, and America should follow our lead.